Hello, and in today's video we are doing possible transfer thoughts ahead of the Game Week 5 deadline. Of course, this Saturday, 11 o'clock, it is the first Saturday deadline of the FPL 23 to 24 season. So make sure you turn on those notifications for the video that will be coming at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning, and make sure you turn on your alarm to wake up, lock in your transfers on Saturday morning, because as always is the way with international breaks, there's been a lot of injuries, a lot of silly people that have made transfers early, and I would just wait until those press conferences on Thursday and Friday before you make your moves. But ultimately, a lot could still happen before deadline. This is just kind of my thoughts at the moment. It's Thursday at the moment, Thursday morning. Let's see where I kind of land by the time we come up with the video Saturday morning. But yeah, if you do go on to enjoy this one, make sure you smash a like on it, subscribe for more content on this FPL Yellow Army content creation channel, and I hope you have enjoyed my recent videos. I mean, there's been a lot of views and I really appreciate the support, so thank you a lot. I recently also did go on FPL Juice, so previewing Game Week 5, we talked about all the possible options, how my team was looking and things like that. So if you did miss that, search up FPL Juice on YouTube. That was really great fun with FPL Plonker. Really interesting, and we got to sound some funny business as well outside of FPL. So it was a really great day. So do check that one out. Also on Spotify, if you search for Fantasy 606, you'll have seen that not for the upcoming game week, but for Game Week 4. I actually went on the pod once again. I made my second appearance on the pod. It was really great fun, I've got to say. I mean, last season when I went on, it was quite amazing, pinch me moment, but to be welcomed on again was really great, to manage the listeners team. And I made a couple of transfers for Game Week 4, which on paper looked really good. It looked really logical. So I brought in Johan Wissa for Joao Pedro. And of course, just my luck, this is the week that Joao Pedro starts, with Ferguson obviously doing very well in that game. But yeah, Welbeck getting injured, I couldn't have foreseen that happening, and yeah, Pedro did get the start, but he didn't actually play too well in my opinion. However, a lot of people rated his hard work and effort and things like that, and he did miss a big chance. So one thing with Pedro is that Champions League and Europa League is around the corner, so for Europa League for Brighton, that will be a concern, especially with the new signing of Ansu Fati. So I'd say if you have Joao Pedro, even though he's still a good player, he can definitely get to a big FPL asset later on in the season. Right now, I'm just not sure Roberto De Zerbi really fancies him, and he has that pressing that he needs to do to his game, which is something to work on. So I think he is just one that I wouldn't go for at the moment. Too much of a headache. But there's plenty of striker options, right, that we'll go on to talk about, that a lot of people are getting interested by. But yeah, I would definitely wait on Ferguson, because if you've brought him in early after his hat-trick against Newcastle, yeah, he might be okay, but I would just get the confirmation from De Zerbi in that press conference before you do anything. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. But yeah, I did bring in Wissa for Pedro for the listeners team, and on paper, yeah, that looked great, with a great fixture for Brentford against Bournemouth. But the last couple of games, unfortunately, Johan Wissa's gone a little bit missing. So, for those that brought him in after that really nice couple of first game weeks, they'll feel very hard done by. But I think Wissa, goals are on the horizon for him, so I'd stay patient if you are an owner. But yeah, that was really unfortunate. They both got 2 points in the end, so that transfer made absolutely no difference. The other transfer I made for the listeners team, again, on paper looked really logical, because Mohamed Salah was eating up a chunk of budget for that team. And, Salah this season has been consistent, but he's just not been hauling big time. And talking of Mohamed Salah, just now, actually, on my Twitter, you can follow me at Roberto Hollis 9, FPL Yellow Army, and I did a tweet, actually, a thread about Mo Salah and whether or not he's worth being in your team at 12.5 million. Is he really good value in your team? So if you didn't already, make sure you check that out about Salah, because it's quite interesting ahead of fixtures going quite nicely for Liverpool from Game Week 5 up until around Game Week 16. There's some nice fixtures. I mean, ultimately, you take it in blocks. There's a couple of not as great fixtures, and then there's great fixtures. A couple of not as great, and then there's great. So generally, it's a nice run for Liverpool now. The problem with them, of course, is always rotation. They've got Jota, they've got Diaz, they've got Darwin, and they've got Gakpo. I mean, Gakpo has not been playing that kind of front three role that he was playing last season. He's been playing almost as a number 8. But yet, that is another option there in that attack that's a player to pick from. And so what that means is, players like Darwin, players like Gakpo and Jota are just too much a rotation risk. Luis Diaz might be fairly nailed on that left, but we're not quite sure. He has been having a few early substitutions. But yeah, with regards to that, it doesn't mean that Salah won't play because he is very much first choice. But what it does mean is that it's harder for Salah to get those points because, not everything is going through Salah as it used to be in Liverpool. So they're sharing those goals, they're sharing those points across the attack, across the likes of, the midfield as well. Like Dominic Szoboszlai looks fantastic. He's starting to get used to his surroundings there. So I would just say with Salah, if you own him, you probably hold. But if you don't own him, maybe think about whether or not it's worth it. But yeah, have a little look at that thread that I did post, and that hopefully will help you ahead of Game Week 5's Saturday deadline. So now we get into the video. Let's talk about kind of my options in the last couple of weeks. I did talk about it in my Game Week 4 review, some possible transfer thoughts. I thought about Game Week 5, I was probably likely to roll. But now, as the week's gone on and we've seen a few interesting options, being talked about, there are some more picks that I'm kind of interested in buying. Now, I look at my team for Game Week 5 and, to be honest, it's very rollable. It is very rollable because although I have got a couple of injury doubts there for Mark Gay, who has got, unfortunately, a muscle injury, and then you've got Baldock, who's got a calf injury. That's not ideal, of course, but they are my bench defenders anyway, right? So I'm starting a 3-5-2. 3-5-2 has been the way to go this season with so many good value midfielders. No one basically above 10 million, it seems, that's getting those big returns. So ultimately, that's the optimal play. So it means that having those 2 up front and having 3 at the back just makes a lot of sense. But it does mean, of course, that my squad depth as a whole has been hindered because on my bench is currently Mark Gay, Baldock and Mubama, right? And Mubama, of course, has not been starting, unfortunately, for West Ham. He is a pick that I thought would get minutes. David Moyes said that at the start of the season, but no, unfortunately, that's not come to fruition. And meanwhile, players like Cameron Archer, maybe even Lyle Foster with his upcoming double game week for Burnley, maybe they could be options. But the way I look at it is, with midfield 5 being so strong this season, it's hard to justify a third striker in your team because then you're always having to bench one of those really good midfielders or one of those really good forwards. Because I think if those people have only got Haaland really as their striker, then the kind of conversation's a bit different. You can bring in someone like a Foster for Burnley or maybe even a Morris at Luton if you feel that he will do well. So I honestly feel that there is scope for these kind of cheaper forwards to be sold, but in my team setup it just doesn't seem worth a transfer because I could get in an Archer, but he got Tottenham this week, not an easy fixture. Okay, he's going to be a good one to own going forward when you wildcard. He's probably the best 4.5 forward, but it's just not worth it. So it leaves me with quite a big bench of headaches, really, because if someone does get minutes risks and dropped in Game Week 5, because of course, remember, coming up in the midweek between Game Week 5 and 6, there is going to be the Champions League, Round 1 and Europa League. So that does mean it's a bit of a headache, right? Because you've got people there like Julian Alvarez, like Mitoma, who of course will be in Europa League action, where you think they'll probably play, but there's no guarantees, right? And Julian Alvarez, funnily enough, did actually travel to the Argentina game in Bolivia recently, which is of course high altitudes. And that's not obviously ideal for a player's, fitness and fatigue. He should hopefully be fine to start, but it's one of those things you never know with Pep, right? He's back from his time out with a back injury. He's back on the touchline. So will Pep Roulette bring in, Doku for a start and bench Alvarez? I severely hope not, but I do feel Alvarez is not really affected by that system that Doku's come in. I mean, only Doku started because of Jack Grealish being unfit to play against Fulham. So I think Alvarez is pretty nailed with KDB. I say nailed as much as the Man City attacker can be, right, outside of Haaland. But with, the injury that KDB has had, that has really opened up a gap for Alvarez to get consistent minutes. And so I was very happy with him, Alvarez, last week when I brought him in at quite a low ownership of 9.8%, and he got that 14-point haul for my team. Very, very nice against Fulham. Hopefully he'll start going forward. But yeah, that is one to think about. Obviously with the Argentina, playing that game, I didn't think he'd start, but he ended up playing 85 minutes. Let's hope he's, fairly recovered for the next game. And then Mitoma as well. Like Mitoma, I still feel fairly nailed, but obviously Europa League will be a factor. And Brighton's group has been pretty difficult, right? They've got Ajax, they've got Marseille. So whether or not they go full strength there, and that therefore means that they'll play weaker teams in the Premier League, I don't know. It seems hard to believe that because of how good De Zerbi is as a coach. But I think Mitoma's still fairly safe from rotation. I think Joao Pedro and Ansu Fati probably more at risk of that. But I do feel that Mitoma's fairly locked on that left-hand side. So we should be okay in the end. But it's just one to think about with the weak bench. So then that's where my transfer plans kind of come into fruition, really, where I can bring in some defender to replace either Mark Guéhi or Baldock. Now, Baldock, admittedly, has not been the 4.0 defender that I was hoping he would be. Of course, they've not had the easiest of fixtures, and it has been early in their season, so you'd imagine there'd be some teething problems at the start for them to try and sort out the defence. But Baldock, to be fair, has sometimes picked up some attacking positions, like the heat maps are looking okay, but generally Sheffield United have just not been good at the start of the season, and Baldock obviously is playing in a defence that's really going to struggle for clean sheets, so that's not ideal. And as I say, he's not getting those attacking returns, and now he's flagged. So it does make me think Baldock's the one to go here, because even though Mark Guéhi is not really getting those attacking returns either, I do feel that generally Crystal Palace are quite a solid defence, so they're probably one that would be quite nice to own going forward. I could always rotate with, the defender I bring in. I could rotate with Guéhi when Guéhi's got a tough fixture. I could play this other defender that I bring in. So, and as well, like clean sheets are hard to come by. So the way I look at it is that you're going to want someone with a bit more attacking upside. So maybe you could bring in like a Saliba, right, for Arsenal. But the way I look at it is Arsenal defensively, they've been keeping not many clean sheets, and there's not a lot of attacking upside with someone like Saliba. Gabriel obviously seems like he is injured, even though he's just come back actually in the Arsenal lineup. He did apparently get an injury for Brazil, on the international break, so not ideal at all for those people that own him. I sold him, a couple of weeks ago back in Gameweek 3, and it worked out at the time. Brought in Chilwell for the clean sheet against Luton when he got benched again against Fulham, but ultimately. I don't think Arsenal defence is really worth the value. So then you're looking at maybe a Chelsea defender. Well, no, because although they've got good fixtures, they've not looked great defensively recently, and you really own Chilwell for that attacking upside. So there's just not a lot of defenders to choose from outside of maybe Destiny Udogie. So Udogie's one that I'm really looking at. I'm also looking at Pedro Porro. Now, Pedro Porro, I just feel like he is a bit of a minute's risk because there's a chance Emerson Royale gets put out onto that side. But also, I do love how differential Porro is. So he's one that if I hear that Porro starts, then he could be one that I'm tempted by. Obviously, the early kickoff this week is Wolves against Liverpool. So no early kickoff news, unfortunately, for Tottenham. But, people will look at that Liverpool game and think, oh, maybe Darwin. He's started a couple of back-to-back games. Did get subbed off early, though, against against Aston Villa. And even though it's Wolves, which is a great fixture for Darwin, I still feel that he's just his shot accuracy is so poor that he could probably still miss a lot of big chances as he usually does. So I just don't think he's worth it. And I really like Alvarez, to be honest, at the moment in my team. So I don't feel that makes much sense. And ultimately, then I look at, defenders like Spurs defenders. So the likes of Destiny Udogie and Porro, they do have a bit of a concern around clean sheets because of just how attacking they are playing under Ange Postecoglou. And I'm not sure that clean sheet they got against Manchester United, whether that will be, repeatable for a lot of game weeks. But you do have them there for the attacking upside, and they are pretty cheap, especially Udogie, who I think is below 5 million at around 4.7. So definitely Udogie's one that I'm thinking about. It's just whether I trust that Spurs defence. I have to think about that. But yeah, that's definitely an option to replace Baldock. And then the other things I'm talking about would really be to drop one of those midfielders. But I'm not sure how comfortable I am with that, because although going forward the fixtures aren't great for Brighton, there is a great fixture for them in Game Week 6. And if I think that Mitoma starts that Bournemouth game, I won't really want to be selling. But there is Europa League to factor in. There is trickier fixtures, and there is a shiny new toy in that midfield, Heung-min Son, who of course did score a hat-trick. Now, whether or not he starts again in the number 9, we'll have to wait and see. Sheffield United are a team that's set up in a low block, so it might be possible that Richarlison is better suited for that in the number 9 role. Now, of course, Richarlison's not been good, but I do feel that it's not out of the question that that is what happens. So, Son is not as effective on the left. We know he can still get goals there, though. It's just that we prefer him there. So, it is one of those ones, you see the hat-trick, you think everyone bring him in. It's a bit knee-jerk. But of course, it's different with Son because he's a proven FPL asset of previous seasons. So it's not a bad shout for a transfer this week. I'm not sure whether selling Mitoma is worth it just because, I think Mitoma can do things against Man United. We've seen how defensively they've been this season. And Mitoma, I think, is fairly nailed and has got that Bournemouth fixture. So it's a reluctant sell if I do sell Mitoma. But it is quite exciting if Son is playing that number 9 and with Sheffield United up next. Obviously, Arsenal-Liverpool a bit trickier, but to be honest, that actually is the sort of game that I think could suit Son because, Arsenal-Liverpool, they're going to try and, make it hard for Spurs, but Spurs playing on the break, in behind, and, Arsenal defence this season, as I was saying earlier, has not been great. And so Liverpool, I think, is actually a great fixture at home as well for Tottenham. So I just look at it and think, Son, really good transfer in, but let's wait and see maybe if his position is still in that number 9 and whether Richarlison does start in that number 9 because remember in the game against Burnley Richarlison was subbed on for Son, so it's a bit of a like for like. Will Richarlison be that number 9 or will it be Son starting ahead of Richarlison yet again? We'll have to see, but I think definitely Son will start. It's just about where his role is in the team. So that's a possible solution there. Also, I'm looking at the Liverpool midfield now. It is a bit of a minefield because of the rotation I mentioned, but a couple of options that are maybe a bit less risk of a rotation is Luis Diaz. Now, Luis Diaz, I do feel, isn't the best option just because he is getting subbed off early, a bit like Darwin, around the 60-minute mark. And with Diaz, the last couple of games he has blanked, not been the most exciting. But on his day, we know how good Luis Diaz is, right? And I think he's fairly safer minutes on that left-hand side, as much as you'd hope. So, great fixture against Wolves, attack the fixture, and, the fixtures I talked about with Salah, they are looking pretty nice, right? I can't deny it for Liverpool, but the ultimate thing is Diaz worth it? Because he might be better value than Salah? Well, if I want to get away into that Liverpool attack, maybe Diaz is the answer. However, maybe Dominic Szoboszlai is your man, because he's cheaper than Diaz at 7.0. Now, I'm not as keen on Szoboszlai, I'll be honest, because ultimately he isn't really much of an FPL pick, I think. But I've got to say, shout out to him because he looked very good against Aston Villa. He is a more creative player, really. He's not that kind of player that's going to score goals week in, week out. But he is creative and he's nailed. He's probably more nailed actually than Luis Diaz. So I think this is a very interesting differential. He's only about 5% owned. So if you're thinking he's going to go off, you could bring him in. But I'm just not sure if he's actually going to consistently score the goals for them. But maybe on a few set pieces, taking them off Trent, that could be a nice avenue to points. So I don't mind Szoboszlai, but I don't know. It's one of those ones, a bit risky. Then Ødegaard is a possible one as well because, did score again last week against Man United and I didn't own him, of course. But it's whether or not it's worth it, really, with Arsenal's fixtures, which are turning around game week 7, 8. It's not ideal, really. They've basically got about 3 more good fixtures, Arsenal. And then maybe you'd look to sell your Arsenal midfielders. Maybe you wouldn't actually sell Saka, though, because he is kind of on penalties, pretty fixture-proof. One, maybe it's a season keeper. But Ødegaard, is it worth doubling up on that Arsenal midfield now that their fixtures might turn? But Ødegaard is a nice option, right? We know he's fairly nailed. The only thing is, sometimes he plays a bit deeper, a bit like Fernandes at Manchester United. We'll get to Fernandes in a second. But I do feel that Ødegaard still does pop up with enough goals to make him worth consideration. And he might share some penalties with Saka. So, yeah, Ødegaard's not the worst option, but maybe not this week. I mean, Everton is a nice fixture, but it's just whether or not he's one to have for the long term. And you could always go for him now and wildcard him out in game week 8, 9, because that's a period that a lot of managers are looking to wildcard. So could be a short-term punt, Ødegaard, and I don't mind it. And then, the only other thing to talk about, really, is talking about Fernandes. And I just feel with Fernandes that he is a bit of a frustrating own right now, and he is dropping some deep positions like he was against Arsenal for Manchester United. And then he had a great international break with Portugal. I mean, that 9-0 incredible win for them. And he got a goal and 3 assists. I know it's Luxembourg, but, at the end of the day, he's still got the goal and he's still got the attacking returns. And he did score in the game before that as well. So Fernandes in good form. Maybe that will help him at Manchester United, although the background at that club is not looking too good. What with the, up in arms about the likes of Jadon Sancho, the, unfortunate investigation regarding Anthony. So there's a lot of turmoil at Manchester United at the moment, and they were not great in that, in the Arsenal game to concede 3 when they looked like they should have won it. It was a close offside in the end, but ultimately United aren't a team in form, right? But that would make you think, why would I double up on United's midfield? I could go for Rashford, but as I say, United are a bit sketchy at the moment, and I do feel that maybe selling Fernandes isn't the worst thing, because of the fact that Bruno's playing deeper, but it's just a risk that comes with that, right? Fernandes being on penalties, the fixtures do look very nice from Game Week 6 onwards, and the underlying data for Fernandes is actually really nice. So there's a lot of creativity for that Fernandes pick, and I do feel that there could be a lot of managers that regret selling him this week. But I'm tempted, because the only route for me to get to Mohamed Salah is Bruno Fernandes out. So yeah, that is a one I'm considering. I've talked about him in my thread, whether or not he's worth it. It's a bit of a 50-50, but personally my gut tells me no. However, I'm tempted. So Fernandes would be that enabler to get me to Salah. It's just whether or not the money is worth spending for Salah when he's just not really delivering big, double-digit hauls. So yeah, that's my transfer thoughts ahead of Game Week 5. Obviously, a lot of that could change, but that's just how I feel at the moment going into Saturday's deadline. Get in the comment section below, what are your current transfer thoughts ahead of the deadline? And if you have enjoyed this, smash a like on it, subscribe for more content. As I say, I did a couple of appearances on some pods, so do check them out from FPL Juice and Fantasy 606. Also, I've got to tell you about an upcoming podcast that I'll be doing with a mate from uni, Chris Sebastian. He's an absolute legend, Chelsea fan. Ultimately, I'm really excited for this. We're doing this pod, and it will be basically an FPL pod, but also a bit of football thrown in. So he's a Chelsea fan, I'm a Watford fan, so we can talk about each of our teams respectively. But we'll also be doing a Game Week 6 review and Game Week 7 preview ahead of that Game Week 7 deadline. So watch out for that, dropping in around about just under 2 weeks. So get in tune for that, and we'll have to hopefully promote that a bit on my channel. So if you don't follow me already, at Instagram it is all lower caps Roberto_the_pro. On Twitter it's at RobertoHollis9, and on YouTube it is, of course, as you're watching now, FPL Yellow Army. But do smash a like on it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.